Welcome to the Efficient eLearning SAP training series. In this video, we'll be posting a vendor invoice against a purchase order using transaction MIRO. And here's our list of topics. First up, we'll confirm where transaction code MIRO fits in the Procure-to-Pay process, followed by an explanation of the difference between a non-PO invoice and an invoice referencing a purchase order. Before posting the invoice, we'll review the status of the purchase requisition using transaction ME53N, display purchase requisition, and the status of the purchase order using transaction ME23N, display purchase order, and transaction ME2N, purchase orders by PO number. We'll then post an invoice against a purchase order in SAP using transaction MIRO. And finally, once the invoice has been posted, we'll again review the status of the purchase requisition using transaction ME53N, display purchase requisition, and the status of the purchase order using transaction ME23N, display purchase order, and transaction ME2N, purchase orders by PO number. Additionally, we'll also analyze the vendor line item display, transaction FBL1N. Let's begin with where transaction MIRO fits in the Procure-to-Pay process. It's worth noting at this point that a PO invoice references a purchase order, so the procurement steps in the Procure-to-Pay process: create purchase requisition, approve purchase requisition, convert purchase requisition to purchase order, and post-goods receipt should have already been completed, as is the case in this example. Transaction MIRO sits within the post-vendor invoice step and is completed by the Accounts Payable department. Okay, so we've established where transaction MIRO fits in the Procure-to-Pay process. Now let's discuss the difference between a non-PO invoice and an invoice referencing a purchase order. Here's the two documents side by side. Visually, the only real difference is the purchase order field. As you would expect, for a non-PO invoice, this field is blank. Conversely, for an invoice referencing a purchase order, the field is populated with the relevant purchase order number. So why do some invoices reference a purchase order and others don't? Some organizations have a strict policy. All invoices must reference a purchase order or they cannot be processed. But typically, most organizations will require the majority of invoices to reference a purchase order, with some limited exceptions. In this fictitious company example, invoices for mobile phone plan costs are a permitted exception. That is, invoices don't require a purchase order. However, the purchase of mobile phone handsets still requires a purchase order. In this video, the focus is on posting an invoice against a purchase order, so we can discard the non-PO invoice. Now let's review the status of the purchase requisition and the purchase order in SAP prior to posting the invoice. Navigate to the SAP menu folder Logistics, Materials Management, Purchasing, and Purchase Requisition. Double-click on the entry for transaction ME53N, Display Purchase Requisition. In my screen, the correct purchase requisition is currently displayed. However, if the correct purchase requisition is not currently displayed, click on the Other Purchase Requisition button. Click in the Purchase Requisition field, type in the relevant purchase requisition number, and then click the Other Document button. Click on the Status tab at Item Details level. Note this section of the tab where the purchase order number is displayed. Once the invoice has been posted, it will appear in this section. Click the green back arrow to return to the SAP main menu. Expand the purchase order folder and double-click on transaction ME23N, Display Purchase Order. Click the Selection Variant drop-down and choose My Purchase Orders. If the purchase order you created earlier is not already displayed, locate the purchase order in the list and double-click on it. Click this icon to display the list of tabs at item details level. And select the Purchase Order History tab. You can see there is a goods receipt posting for this line of the purchase order. Once the invoice is posted, it will appear on this tab. Now click the green back arrow to return to the SAP main menu. Expand the List Displays folder and double-click on transaction ME2N, Purchase Orders by PO Number. Click in the Purchasing Document field and type in the relevant purchase order number. Clear out any of the fields that have automatically populated except for the Scope of List field. This field value should be set to best_ALV to utilize the more efficient ALV grid reporting style. Please note the code for the ALV layout for purchase orders in your system may be different. Click the Execute button to run the report. Our main focus in this report is these 4 columns. As you can see, the still to be invoiced quantity and still to be invoiced value fields currently represent the full order quantity and order value, as we've not yet posted any invoices for this line of the purchase order. Once the invoice has been posted, these fields will be updated in the report. Click the green back arrow twice to return to the SAP main menu. We'll now post an invoice against a purchase order using transaction MIRO. On the left of screen is the invoice. On the right is SAP. Collapse the purchase order folder. And navigate to folder Logistics Invoice Verification and Document Entry. Now double-click on Transaction MIRO. If it's your first time using the transaction, you may be prompted with this dialog box asking you to enter the company code. If so, enter the relevant company code and click the green tick icon to continue. In this example, I'll be using company code 8520. Regardless of whether you are prompted with a dialog box, always make note of the company code. If the company code is not correct, you can switch company code using menu option Edit, Switch Company Code. In this example, the company code is correct, so there's no need to change it. Also note the value in the transaction field. We'll delve deeper into the differences between these transactions later on in the video series. In this example, we've ordered goods from the vendor has shipped the goods to us, and we've received an invoice from the vendor requesting payment for the goods. So we can leave the transaction field as the default value, invoice. The first field we need to populate is the invoice date field. This is the date on the vendor invoice. Click in the invoice date field and enter the date referenced on the invoice. Next up is the reference field. This is the vendor's invoice number. Click in the reference field and type in the invoice number from the invoice. The posting date is pre-populated with the current date. Normally this date isn't changed unless you're given specific instructions by the accounting department. For example, sometimes at month end an instruction is given to use the last date for the prior month until the prior period is closed. In this example, we'll simply leave it as the default. The amount field represents the gross amount of the invoice, so the net amount plus tax. Click in the amount field and type in the total value from the invoice. The tax amount field is the total tax value for the invoice. Click in the tax amount field and type in the value from the invoice. To the right of the tax amount field is the tax code field at invoice header level. If all of the lines on the invoice have the same tax code, you can enter that tax code in this field and it will default to this value on all of the invoice line items below. However, if not all of the line items have the same tax code, it's best to leave this tax code field at invoice header level blank. In our example, there's only one line item, so we can enter the tax code in this field. Based on the values on the invoice and experience of this type of purchase, the tax code should be P1, GST 10%. As this is the default value for this field, there's no need to change it. Now press the Enter key on the keyboard to validate the information entered. The invoice header details are now complete. We can now move on to the invoice line items. Note the purchase order number referenced on the invoice. Click in the purchase order field, enter the purchase order number from the invoice, and press the Enter key on the keyboard. Note the amount and quantity fields at line item level are already populated. The quantity field defaults to the open goods receipt quantity. That is, the quantity that has been goods receipted but not yet invoiced. The amount field defaults to the open goods receipt quantity multiplied by the net price on the purchase order item. Please note this amount field at line item level represents the net amount for the line item, that is, excluding tax. If required, you can edit the values in these fields to match the values on the invoice. However, in this example, these values match the values on the invoice, so there's no need to change them. If I scroll across the screen, you can also see the tax code that was copied from the equivalent field at invoice header level. Now press the Enter key on the keyboard to validate the entered values. As the balance of the invoice is 0 and there are no error messages, we can now click the Post button to post the vendor invoice. However, there is an option to simulate the invoice postings. This is optional, but I always like to include this step as it can quickly highlight any possible issues with the invoice. For example, if there is a large variance posting. Click the Simulate button to simulate the invoice postings. These are the expected postings. That is, there is no variance posting because the quantity and value goods receipted matches the quantity and value invoiced. Please note you can post from this screen. However, I prefer to return to the previous screen to review any warning or error messages. Click the back button to return to the previous screen. Again, as the balance of the invoice is 0 and there are no error messages, I can now click the Post button to post the vendor invoice. Note the message at the bottom of the screen with the invoice document number. Now click the green back arrow to return to the SAP main menu. Now that we've posted the invoice, let's review the status of the purchase requisition and the purchase order. Double-click on the entry for transaction ME53N, Display Purchase Requisition. If the correct purchase requisition is not currently displayed, click on the Other Purchase Requisition button. Click in the Purchase Requisition field, type in the relevant purchase requisition number, and then click the Other Document button. Click on the Status tab at Item Details level. As you can see, the invoice now appears under the goods receipt. Click the green back arrow to return to the SAP main menu. Expand the purchase order folder and double-click on transaction ME23N, Display Purchase Order. If required, click the Selection Variant drop-down and choose My Purchase Orders. And if the purchase order you created earlier isn't already displayed, locate it in the list and double-click on it. If required, click this icon to display the list of tabs at Item Details level and select the Purchase Order History tab. You can now see the invoice that was posted earlier. Click on the link for the invoice document to display the invoice. As you can see, the invoice document contains all the information we entered when we posted the invoice. Please note this is the logistics invoice document. A separate accounting document is also generated for the invoice. To view the accounting document, click the Follow on Documents button. For the moment, we are simply noting the existence of the two different documents, the logistics invoice document and the accounting document. Time permitting, we'll create a separate video analysing and explaining the financial postings for the goods receipt, the invoice, and also the payment. Click the green back arrow 3 times to return to the SAP main menu. In the List Displays folder, double-click on transaction ME2N, Purchase Orders by PO number. Click in the Purchasing Document field and type in the relevant purchase order number. Again, clear out any other fields that have been automatically populated except for the Scope of List field. This field value should be set to best_ALV to utilize the more efficient ALV grid reporting style. Again, please note the code for the ALV layout for purchase orders in your system may be different. Now click the Execute button to run the report. Note the still to be invoiced quantity and still to be invoiced value fields. The values in these columns are now 0, as we've just posted an invoice for the full order quantity and value. Click the green back arrow twice to return to the SAP main menu. Now the invoice has been posted, we can view it on the vendor line item display, transaction FBL1N. Click the SAP menu button to restore the menu back to the default layout. Then navigate to folder Accounting, Financial Accounting, Accounts Payable, and Account. Now double-click on transaction FBL1N, vendor line item display. The company code is correct, but I'm not sure of the vendor code, so I'll click the drop-down list for the vendor field and search for the vendor. Click in the Name field, type XYZ*, and then click the Start Search button. Double-click on the entry for XYZ Mobile. We can now choose the line item selection. There are 3 choices: Open Items, Cleared Items, and All Items. I'd like to see everything, so I'm going to choose All Items. And in the Type section, I'm simply going to leave it as the default value, Normal Items. Now click the Execute button to run the report. As you can see, the invoice we posted previously in transaction MIRO now appears in this report. The document type is RE. This is the standard document type for invoices posted via transaction MIRO. Double-click on the document number to display the invoice. This is the accounting document for the invoice posting. The entry currently displayed is the vendor line item. If you wish to see all of the postings for the accounting document, click on the Call Up Document Overview button. you can now see all of the financial postings for the invoice. If you wish to see the original document posting, that is the logistics invoice document, choose menu option Environment, Document Environment, Original Document. Click the back arrow twice to return to the vendor line item display. We've now covered all of the content for this video. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be notified when new videos are uploaded. Thanks for watching.